I stood in the ballroom, watching my husband toast to our success, knowing the FBI was waiting in the wings. He thought he'd successfully framed me for embezzling $7 million, but he didn't realize I'd already handed the real evidence to Agent Miller. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Inherited Revenge. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The silence in the house was usually my favorite part of the day, a rare moment of peace before the chaos of the architectural firm we built from the ground up consumed my morning. But tonight, the silence felt heavy, suffocating, like the air before a thunderstorm. I was sitting in the library of our sprawling estate, the one James loved to show off to clients, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. I had been battling a severe bout of bronchitis for the last 3 weeks, leaving me physically drained and mentally foggy. That was why James had insisted I take a step back from the finances for the month. For my health, he had said, pressing a kiss to my feverish forehead. I looked down at the tablet in my lap, the blue light stinging my tired eyes. I shouldn't have been logging in. I had promised James I would rest, that I would trust him and the new director of operations to handle the quarterly audit prep. But old habits died hard. I was the CFO. I was the one who watched the numbers. And something about the way James had rushed out of the house that evening, claiming an emergency meeting with a developer, sat wrong in my gut. I navigated through the secure server, my fingers trembling slightly. Whether from the lingering illness or a sudden chill, I wasn't sure. I just wanted to check the escrow accounts. Just a quick peek to ensure the $7 million transfer for the new Skyline project had cleared. It hadn't. I frowned, refreshing the page. "That's not right," I whispered, my voice raspy. The balance showed 0, but the transaction log didn't show a payment to the construction firm. It showed a withdrawal. I tapped deeper, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. A withdrawal of $7 million initiated 3 days ago while I was bedridden with a high fever. I followed the digital trail, expecting to see a vendor code I recognized. Instead, I saw a routing number for a bank in the Cayman Islands. "What are you doing, James?" I breathed, scrolling frantically. Then I saw the authorization signature. It wasn't James's, it was mine. I froze, the room spinning. There, in high-resolution digital ink, was my signature, a perfect replica of the one I used for legal documents, but I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even left my bed on that date. I clicked on the metadata of the file. The transfer had been authorized from my personal laptop, the one currently sitting in my office at the firm, the one I hadn't touched in weeks. My stomach lurched. I quickly pulled up the subledger, digging into the miscellaneous expenses folder, a place where we usually kept petty cash receipts. It was flooded with files, PDFs, emails, memos. I opened one at random. It was an email sent from my account to a generic offshore inquiry address, asking about non-extradition policies and asset shielding. "No," I gasped, the word catching in my throat, triggering a coughing fit that bent me double. "No, this isn't possible." I wiped tears from my eyes and opened another file. It was a drafted confession letter, saved in my drafts folder, lamenting a gambling addiction I didn't have. The narrative was being constructed brick by brick, document by document. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me more effectively than the illness ever could. James wasn't just stealing the money. He was painting a picture. He was crafting a narrative where I, the sick, mentally unstable wife, had cracked under pressure and looted the company accounts. I looked at the timestamp on the most recent file modification. It was 10 minutes ago. Someone was in my office right now, finalizing the frame job. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It was a lethal injection administered by the person I trusted most in the world. I sat there for what felt like hours, though it must have only been 20 minutes. The glow of the tablet screen had turned off, leaving me in the dark, but I didn't move. My mind was racing, replaying every interaction I'd had with James over the past 6 months. The late nights, the sudden interest in my passwords in case of emergency. The way he had encouraged me to see a therapist for stress, ensuring there was a medical paper trail of my alleged instability. The sound of the garage door opening snapped me back to reality. The rumble of his Porsche echoed through the floorboards. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I couldn't let him know. If he knew I had seen the accounts, he might accelerate whatever plan he had. I scrambled to close the apps on the tablet, wiping the history with shaking fingers, and tossed it onto the side table. I grabbed my book, opened it to a random page, and leaned my head back against the wingback chair, forcing my breathing to slow. James walked in a moment later. He looked immaculate, as always. His tailored suit was wrinkle-free, his silver fox hair perfectly coiffed. He smelled of expensive scotch and a perfume that was definitely not mine, something floral and cloying. "Amelia," he said, his voice laced with that practiced, silky concern he used in board meetings. "You're still up. You should be resting, darling. The doctor said you need sleep." He walked over, placing a hand on my forehead. His palm was cool, but it felt like a brand against my skin. I had to use every ounce of willpower not to recoil, not to scream, not to vomit. "I couldn't sleep," I rasped, keeping my eyes half closed. "The coughing." "I'm sorry," he sighed, moving to the liquor cabinet to pour himself a drink. He didn't offer me anything, not even water. "I just got back from the site. The developers are being a nightmare about the Gala logistics. Can you believe the 20th anniversary is only 3 days away?" "3 days," I echoed. "Are we ready?" He took a sip, his back to me. "Almost. There are just a few loose ends. Speaking of which," he turned, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Did you manage to sign those tax compliance forms I left on the counter? The auditors need them first thing in the morning." My heart stopped. The tax compliance forms. I had glanced at them yesterday, but hadn't had the energy to read them. They were likely the final nail in my coffin, documents that would legally tie me to the transfers. I forgot," I lied, shifting slightly to feign weakness. "I was so dizzy today, James, I couldn't focus." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, gone so quickly I almost missed it. "Amelia, it's really important. It protects the firm. I need you to sign them tonight." "I will," I promised, closing my eyes. "Just let me rest a little more. Leave them on the desk." He stared at me for a long moment. I could feel his gaze dissecting me, looking for any sign that I knew. I kept my breathing shallow, my face slack. Finally, he sighed. "All right, but don't forget. We can't have any hiccups before the big night. It's going to be a historic evening for us." "Historic," I whispered. "Get some sleep," he said, turning off the lamp, plunging me into darkness. "I'm going to shower." As he walked away, I listened to his footsteps fade. He was so confident. He thought I was the same Amelia who had followed him blindly for 20 years. He thought I was weak, sick, and easily manipulated. But he had forgotten one crucial thing. He had forgotten that I was the one who set up the original server architecture 20 years ago. And he didn't know that I had a mirrored backup of every keystroke logged on the executive network sent to a private, encrypted server in the basement. A server he didn't even know existed. I waited until I heard the shower running before I moved. I didn't go to the basement yet. I wasn't strong enough to make the stairs without risking a coughing fit that would alert him. Instead, I lay there in the dark, letting the anger fuel me, burning away the sickness. We had started Vance and Sterling in a garage that smelled of mildew and cheap coffee. I was the architect of the business model. James was the face. I handled the contracts, the regulations, the finances. He handled the handshakes and the charming smiles. It worked because I loved the work, and I loved him. I had sacrificed my own design career to ensure his name was on the awards, to ensure he felt like the big man he so desperately wanted to be. I had liquidated my inheritance to bail us out during the 2008 crash. I had mortgaged my parents' home to pay for our first real office. I had given him everything. and in return, he was selling me down the river for $7 million and a fresh start. I thought about the last year. James had become distant, irritable. He bought a new sports car. He started going to the gym twice a day. He criticized my appearance, telling me I looked tired or old compared to the wives of our competitors. It was the classic midlife crisis cliché, or so I had thought. I had tried to be supportive. I had tried to be understanding. Then came Julian. Julian was 26, with a degree in business communications from a university I'd barely heard of. James had hired her 6 months ago as the director of operations, a title that meant nothing but gave her access to everything. She was beautiful, undeniably so, sharp feeder. Ease, endless legs, and a wardrobe that cost more than her salary should have allowed. At first, I thought she was just incompetent. She lost files, she double-booked meetings, she forgot to CC me on emails. But now, staring into the darkness, the puzzle pieces slammed together. She wasn't incompetent. She was isolating me. Every mistake she made created a wedge between me and the staff, making me look like the nagging, micromanaging shrew while she played the innocent victim of my wrath. "She's just trying to help, Amelia," James would say when I complained. "You're being paranoid. She looks up to you." Looks up to me. She wanted to be me. I remembered a dinner 2 weeks ago. Julian had been there, uninvited, claiming she needed James to sign off on a permit. She sat at our table, drinking my wine, laughing too loudly at James's jokes. I had caught her looking at my diamond tennis bracelet, a gift from James for our 10th anniversary. It wasn't a look of admiration. It was a look of appraisal, like she was wondering how it would look on her wrist. And James had looked at her with a hunger he hadn't shown me in a decade. The shower turned off upstairs. I heard the heavy thud of James walking around the bedroom. He was up there, likely texting her. Probably telling her that the crazy wife was almost out of the way. Probably joking about how easy it was to steal from the woman who balanced the books. They thought they were the architects of this master plan. They thought they were building a new life on the foundation of my ruin. But they had made a fatal error in their blueprint. They assumed the foundation was weak just because it had a few cracks. They didn't realize that I was the steel reinforcement that held the entire structure together. And if they wanted to bring me down, I would make sure the entire building came down on top of their heads. I wasn't going to sign those tax papers. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to war. The morning light that filtered through the heavy velvet curtains of the master bedroom was gray and unforgiving. I hadn't slept, not really. I had spent the hours between 3 and 6 in the morning staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic breathing of the man sleeping next to me, a man who was actively planning to send me to federal prison. When James's alarm finally buzzed at 6:30, I feigned sleep. I felt the mattress shift as he sat up, heard the soft click of his phone screen unlocking. He didn't move for a long time. Was he texting Julian? Was he checking the offshore accounts? "Amelia," he whispered, testing the waters. I let out a slow, heavy breath, keeping my eyes shut. Satisfied that I was unconscious, he slid out of bed. I listened to his morning routine, the shower, the electric razor, the zip of his suit bag. He didn't kiss me goodbye. He didn't even check my temperature. He simply walked out the door, the heavy oak slamming shut with a finality that echoed in my bones. The moment the garage door rumbled shut, I threw off the covers. The lethargy of the bronchitis was still there, a heavy weight on my chest, but the adrenaline was sharper. I wasn't just a sick wife anymore, I was a CEO under siege. I didn't go to the kitchen for coffee. I went straight to the basement. The server room was my sanctuary. When we built the house, James had wanted a wine cellar. I had insisted on a climate-controlled data center. For security, I'd told him. He had laughed and called me paranoid, but he let me have it because it kept the noisy machines out of the office. I unlocked the reinforced door with my biometric print and stepped into the cool, humming air. Rows of blue lights blinked in the darkness. I sat at the terminal, my fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. I wasn't accessing the cloud. I was accessing the raw, mirrored data streams. I pulled up the logs from the last 72 hours. James was clever, I'd give him that. He had used a VPN to mask his IP address when he initiated the transfers, making it look like the request came from my laptop's specific MAC address. To an external auditor, it would look airtight. Amelia Vance logged in. Amelia Vance authorized the transfer. Amelia Vance confirmed the wire. "But you got lazy, James," I muttered, typing in a command line to bring up the packet headers. He had made one critical mistake. He had logged into his personal email, the one he used for his golf club and hidden subscriptions, on the same browser session he used to spoof my credentials. He hadn't cleared the cache on the server side. It was a tiny digital footprint, a ghost in the machine, but it was there. User: J. Vance Priv active at the exact second the transfer was authorized. It wasn't enough to convict him yet. A good lawyer could argue it was a glitch or that I had hacked his email, but it was enough to start a war. I needed help. I needed someone who could take this digital ghost and turn it into a concrete weapon. I pulled my burner phone from the safe, a precaution I'd taken years ago when we started landing government contracts, and dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years. "Miller," a gruff voice answered on the second ring. "It's Amelia Vance," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. There was a pause. "Well, that's a name I haven't heard since the Treasury Department audit of 19. To what do I owe the pleasure? Please tell me you're not calling to offer me a job. I like retirement." "I'm not calling for a job, Miller. I'm calling because I have a $7 million hole in my escrow account, and my husband is trying to put my name on the shovel." The line went silent. I could hear the faint scratching of a pen on paper. "Talk to me. I need a full forensic workup. Not through the firm, through you. I need you to trace a wire to the Caymans, and I need you to link a specific shell company to a man named Marcus Vance. And Miller, I need it done before the anniversary gala on Saturday." "That's 3 days, Amelia. That's impossible." "I have the server logs," I said, leaning closer to the microphone. "I have the IP spoofing data. I just need you to connect the offshore bank to him. If you do this, I'll double your old consulting rate. Cash." Miller let out a low whistle. "If half of what you're saying is true, you're not just looking at embezzlement. You're looking at wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. You realize if we go down this road, there's no turning back? You turn him in, the firm might implode." "The firm is already dead, Miller," I said, watching the blue lights blink. "I just want to make sure I'm not buried in the rubble." "Send me the logs," he said. "I'll start digging." By noon, I was dressed. I chose my armor carefully: a structured navy blazer, tailored trousers, and heels that clicked with authority on marble floors. I applied enough concealer to hide the dark circles under my eyes and enough blush to fake a fever-free complexion. I wasn't going to look like the victim today. I drove myself to the office. The Vance and Sterling headquarters was a glass and steel monolith in the city center, a testament to my design sensibilities and James's ego. As I walked through the lobby, the atmosphere shifted. Usually, the receptionists would wave, the junior architects would stop to chat. Today, heads turned, and whispers followed my wake. "They know," I realized, or they think they know. James had been planting seeds. He had probably told them I was having a breakdown, that my performance was slipping. I bypassed the elevator bank and went straight to the executive suite. The glass walls of the conference room offered zero privacy, which was exactly what I wanted. James was in there, standing at the head of the table. Julian was sitting to his right, leaning in close, pointing at something on a tablet. Her hand was resting on his forearm, familiar, intimate, unprofessional. I pushed the door open. "Sorry I'm late." James actually jumped, pulling his arm away from Julian. Julian froze, her perfectly glossed lips parting in surprise. "Amelia," James stammered, smoothing his tie. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in bed." "I felt better," I lied, walking to the other end of the long mahogany table. I didn't sit. I stood, gripping the back of a leather chair. And I realized we have the gala in 48 hours. I couldn't leave my husband to handle everything alone, could I? James exchanged a quick, panicked glance with Julian. Of course not, darling, but really, we have it under control. Julian has been a lifesaver. I turned my gaze to Julian. She was wearing a dress that was far too short for a boardroom, and a necklace that looked suspiciously like a vintage piece I had mentioned wanting months ago. I bet she has, I said, my voice cool. Julian, could you pull up the catering budget? I noticed a discrepancy in the preliminary reports. Julian blinked, looking at James for help. I don't have access to those files, Mrs. Vance, James said. James said what? I interrupted, arching an eyebrow. That the CFO shouldn't see the budget. No, James interjected quickly, stepping between us. She means the files are locked for the audit. You know how it is, Amelia. We froze the accounts to prep for the quarterly review. Ah, yes, the audit. I smiled, a tight, humorless expression. Funny you mention that, James, because I was looking at the system logs this morning, just checking for glitches, of course, and I noticed a rather large transfer authorized from my terminal. $7 million. The room went deadly silent. I watched James's throat bob as he swallowed. 7 million, he repeated, his voice rising an octave. That must be a mistake, a system error. That's what I thought, I said, locking eyes with him. Because the authorization signature was mine, boo. The timestamp was from Tuesday. And on Tuesday, if you recall, I was unconscious with a fever of 102. James laughed, a nervous, fractured sound. Well, you know how technology is. Glitches happen. We'll have it look at it next week after the gala. Actually, I said, leaning forward, I traced the routing number. It's a bank in the Cayman Islands. First Caribbean International. Does that ring a bell, James? I saw it then. The flinch. His left eye twitched, a tell he had possessed since college whenever he was caught in a lie. Julian stood up abruptly. I think I should go check on the florists. Sit down, Julian, I commanded. My voice wasn't loud, but it had the steel of 20 years of boardroom dominance. She sat, looking terrified. Amelia, you're not making sense, James said, his face hardening. He decided to pivot from denial to gaslighting. You've been very sick. The medication you're on, it can cause confusion, paranoia. Maybe you authorized it and forgot. It wouldn't be the first time you've been forgetful lately. Is that the narrative, James? I asked softly. That I'm the confused, sick wife. That I'm looting the company I built because I'm losing my mind. I'm just saying, he said, stepping closer, looming over me, trying to use his height to intimidate. You need rest. You're making a scene. Go home, Amelia. Sign the tax papers I left for you so we can close the books and just rest. The tax papers, I repeated. The ones that declare I take full responsibility for all discretionary spending. It's standard boilerplate, he snapped. I'll sign them, I said. James exhaled, his shoulders sagging in relief. Good, that's all I'm asking. I'll sign them, I continued, right after I verify the counterparty on that Cayman account. Just due diligence. I turned and walked out. My legs were shaking so hard I thought I would collapse, but I kept my back straight. I had poked the bear. Now I had to survive them all. The drive home was a blur of paranoia. I checked my rearview mirror constantly, half expecting to see James's Porsche tailing me. When I got back to the estate, I locked every door. I didn't feel safe in my own home anymore. My phone buzzed. It was Miller. Check your encrypted email. We got a hit. I rushed to the basement, my hands trembling as I typed in the decryption key. The file opened. It was a corporate registry document from the Cayman Islands. Entity, Horizon Holdings Limited. Director, Julian R. Foster. Beneficiary, Marcus J. Vance. Got you, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. It wasn't just James. Julian wasn't a pawn, she was the director of the shell company. She was in on it from day one. I scrolled further. Miller had found more. Julian Foster had a record under a different name in Nevada. Fraud, embezzlement. She had done this before, romanced an executive, drained the accounts, and vanished. James wasn't the mastermind I thought he was the mark. He was destroying his wife and his life for a con artist who was likely planning to leave him the moment the money cleared. A dark, bitter laugh bubbled up in my throat. "Oh, James, you idiot." The front door slammed upstairs. "Amelia," James's voice roared through the house. He wasn't playing the concerned husband anymore. He sounded unhinged. I quickly minimized the window, set the screen to show a generic solitaire game, and stood up. I couldn't hide in the basement. I had to face him. I met him in the kitchen. He was red-faced, his tie loosened, his eyes wild. He slammed a folder onto the marble island. "You embarrassed me today," he spat. "In front of the staff, in front of Julian." I asked a question about the budget, James. "You're checking up on me. You're undermining my authority." He paced back and forth, running a hand through his hair. "I've been trying to protect you, Amelia, trying to keep the firm afloat while you deteriorate." "Deteriorate?" I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms to hide the shaking. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Sign the papers," he demanded, pointing a shaking finger at the folder. "Right now, the auditors are coming tomorrow morning. If these aren't signed, they'll start freezing assets. Do you want to bankrupt us? Do you want to destroy everything we built?" "I'm not signing a confession, James." He froze. "What did you say?" I read the fine print. Paragraph 4. "The undersigned admits to sole discretion over the miscellaneous expense accounts and accepts personal liability for any irregularities." That's a confession. You want me to sign it so when the $7 million is missing, it's legally my fault. James stared at me. The mask dropped completely. There was no love in his eyes, no shared history, just cold reptilian calculation. "You're sick, Amelia," he said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "You're mentally unstable. If you don't sign this, I'll have you committed." Already spoken to Dr. Eris. I told him about your episodes, your memory loss, your aggression. My blood ran cold. He had been seeding this with our family doctor, too. "You wouldn't," I whispered. "I would," he sneered. "And when you're in a facility, I'll have power of attorney. I'll sign the papers myself, so you have a choice. Sign it now and retire gracefully to the lake house, or lose everything and end up in a padded room." He pushed the pen toward me. I looked at the pen, then I looked at him. I needed one last thing. I needed him to admit it. "Why, James?" I asked, my voice breaking. This time the emotion was real. 20 years, we built this together. Why destroy me?" "Because you're suffocating me," he shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. "It's always Amelia's plan, Amelia's budget, Amelia's rules. I'm the CEO, but everyone knows you pull the strings. I want to be free. I want to live my life without asking for my wife's permission to spend a dime." "So you stole $7 million to run away with Julian?" "Yes," he screamed. "Yes, and she appreciates me. She respects me, unlike you." He stopped, breathing hard, realizing what he had just said. I looked at him, a profound sadness washing over me. "I see." "Sign the paper," he said again, though his voice lacked the earlier fire. He looked exhausted. "I'll sign it," I said quietly. "Tomorrow, at the gala. I want to do it after your speech. A symbolic passing of the torch." James narrowed his eyes. "Why at the gala?" "Because if I'm going to lose everything," I said, looking down at my hands, "I want one last night of being Mrs. Vance, the successful co-founder. Let me have that dignity, James, and I'll give you whatever you want." He studied me for a long moment. He saw the defeat in my posture. He saw the broken woman he wanted to see. "Fine," he said, snatching the folder back. "Tomorrow night, but if you try anything, if you say one word." "I won't," I promised. He stormed out of the kitchen. I waited until I heard him go upstairs. Then I reached into the pocket of my blazer and pulled out my phone. I stopped the voice recording app. "Yes, and she appreciates me. She respects me, unlike you." I hit save and forwarded the file to Miller. I have the confession, I typed. Bring the cavalry to the gala. 8:00 p.m. The trap was set. Now I just had to survive the party. The Vance and Sterling 20th anniversary gala was held at the grand ballroom of the plaza, a venue I had personally chosen 6 months ago. The room was a sea of black ties and designer gowns, filled with clients, competitors, and the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the scene, masking the cold dread settling in my stomach. I stood by the entrance, greeting guests with a smile that felt painted on. James was working the room, charming investors, laughing too loudly, his hand often finding its way to the small of Julian's back as she hovered nearby. She wore a stunning emerald green dress, the exact shade of the firm's logo. It was a bold, arrogant move. "You look beautiful, Mrs. Vance," a client said, shaking my hand. "But you seem tired. Is everything all right?" "Just a touch of the flu," I said smoothly, "but I wouldn't miss tonight for the world." The lights dimmed and the crowd hushed. James took the stage, the spotlight finding him instantly. He looked every inch the successful CEO, confident, powerful, untouchable. Julian stood just off stage in the shadows, watching him with a predatory gleam in her eyes. "Thank you all for coming," James began, his voice booming through the speakers. 20 years ago, Amelia and I started this firm with nothing but a dream and a garage. Today, we stand atop the city skyline. Applause rippled through the room. I clapped politely, my eyes scanning the back of the hall. Where was Miller? "Tonight isn't just a celebration of the past," James continued, his gaze finding me in the crowd. "It's a look toward the future, a future where Vance and Sterling expands globally, and I want to take a moment to thank my partner, my wife, Amelia. Without her sacrifices, none of this would be possible." He paused for effect, his smile widening. "In fact, Amelia has decided to take a well-deserved step back from the daily operations to focus on her health. Tonight marks her official retirement." A murmur of surprise went through the crowd. I felt eyes on me, pitying, curious. He was doing it. He was publicly retiring me before I had even signed the papers. "Amelia, come up here," he beckoned, gesturing to the stage. "Let's give her a round of applause." I took a deep breath. This was it. I walked up the stairs, my legs surprisingly steady. James reached out to take my hand, but I stepped past him to the microphone. "Thank you, James," I said, my voice clear and strong. The crowd quieted. "It's true. I have been thinking a lot about the future of this company, and about Agassi." I looked at him. His smile faltered slightly. He sensed the shift in my tone. "But before I step down," I continued, "there is one final piece of business to conclude." James mentioned expansion. He mentioned global reach. What he didn't mention was the $7 million he transferred to a shell company in the Cayman Islands 3 days ago. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. James's face went white. "Amelia, you're confused," he hissed, reaching for the microphone. "She's not well, everyone, please." I pulled the mic away. "I'm perfectly well, James, and so are the forensic accountants who have been tracking the Horizon Holdings account for the last 48 hours. I pointed to the large projection screen behind us, which was supposed to show a montage of our buildings. Instead, it flickered and displayed a document, the bank transfer authorization, with James's digital signature clearly spoofed over mine. Then, the next slide, Julian's name listed as the director of the shell company. Gasps erupted from the audience. Julian tried to bolt from the side of the stage, but 2 men in suits stepped out from the curtains, blocking her path. "And," I said, turning to face my husband, "I think Agent Miller would like a word about wire fraud and embezzlement." At that cue, the side doors burst open. Agent Miller walked in, flanked by 4 uniformed FBI agents. They marched down the center aisle, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. James looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. "Amelia, what have you done? We can fix this. I can explain." "You already explained, James," I said, pulling out my phone and holding it up. Yesterday in the kitchen. Because you're suffocating me, I want to be free. Remember. I played the recording into the microphone. His voice, angry and clear, echoed through the ballroom. Yes, I stole it, and she appreciates me, she respects me, unlike you. The color drained from his face completely. He looked at the agents approaching the stage, then back at me. Amelia, please, I'm your husband. You were my husband, I corrected him, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. Now, you're just a liability I'm liquidating. Agent Miller stepped onto the stage. Marcus Vance, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Julian Foster, you are also under arrest as an accomplice. As the cuffs clicked around James's wrists, he looked at me one last time. There was no anger, only shock. He couldn't believe the sick wife had outmaneuvered him. I built this, he screamed as they dragged him away. I am Vance and Sterling. No, James, I whispered into the microphone, watching him go. You were just the facade, I was always the foundation. The fallout was swift and brutal. The gala ended in chaos, but it was the controlled chaos of justice. The news hit the papers the next morning. Architect tycoon arrested at anniversary gala. Wife exposes $7 embezzlement scheme. James's bail was denied due to the flight risk posed by the offshore accounts. Julian turned on him immediately, cutting a deal with the prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. She admitted everything: the plan to frame me, the fake medical records, the intent to flee to a non-extradition country. The firm took a hit, of course. Clients panicked, investors called, but I was ready. I called an emergency board meeting the following Monday. I walked in, not as the shadow partner, but as the sole CEO. I laid out the recovery plan. I showed them the forensic audit proving that every cent of the stolen money had been recovered from the frozen Cayman accounts. I showed them my designs for the next 3 major projects, designs James had claimed were his. James is gone, I told the board. But the brain of this operation is standing right in front of you. We can fold, or we can build something better, something honest. They voted unanimously to keep me in charge. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. I got everything. The house, the firm, the assets. James got a 10-year sentence in a federal penitentiary. I visited him once just before he was transferred. We sat on opposite sides of the glass partition. He looked older, smaller. The gray suit was replaced by an orange jumpsuit that did him no favors. Why did you come? He asked, his voice hollow. To say goodbye, I said, and to thank you. He frowned. Thank you. You forced me to stop hiding in your shadow, I said. For 20 years, I let you take the credit because I thought I needed you to shine. You showed me that I shine just fine on my own. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. Amelia, he called out as I turned to leave, do you ever miss us? I looked back at him, really looked at him, and realized I felt nothing. No hate, no love, just indifference. I miss who I thought you were, I said, but that man never existed. I walked out of the prison and into the bright afternoon sun. My driver was waiting. Where to, Ms. Vance? He asked. The office, I said, smiling for the first time in months. We have a skyline to build.